The process, I reckon you want to know about whether we are involved in the process as Ovaherero people, because of course the genocide that was committed by the Germans at the turn of the last century, the first of its kind in that century, was committed against Ovaherero Nama people. And those people were two distinct countries, actually, that were found there by the Germans, and it is the land of those people that the Germans decided they wanted it for themselves, and therefore they must dislodge those two communities out of their land or of their land. And so that is how the extermination came about, because the Germans wanted our land, and to get the land, they had to literally kill us or expel us from our land. But so that is why the genocide is against Ovaherero Nama people. But today, the discussion that is had between Namibia and Germany is one that does not include us. The Germans are talking to the Namibian government. They know fully well that in the politics of ethnicity and tribalism that really riddles much of Africa, the government that is in power, or the people who are in power in Windhoek, they are not necessarily Hereros and Namas. So they are not really vested in this campaign for justice. So the Germans conveniently chooses only to speak to them. The Germans also know that for a very long time, the Hereros have been demanding that the Germans directly engage them so that some closure, some justice around this question could be found. But they continue to refuse to engage us. So they are conveniently talking to the Namibian government, and the Namibian government, we know, because of our financial situation, the Namibian government is mostly invested in finding as little money out of this thing whatever they can get out of this thing is good enough for them. So that is the politics around that. It is a politics around which our people are excluded in talks about them. You know, they have financed, they have waged this struggle themselves. They have filed the lawsuits in America, which some would say had failed, but which we as Ovaherero Nama find as successful, in the sense that they raised the profile of our case. It is because of those lawsuits, actually, that Germany decided that they wanted to talk, because their image of this moral authority, this country that had decided to come to terms with its genocidal, racist, and brutal history, this sort of, cocoon or fake image that it has built over the last 60 years, that took a dent, because then people began to ask, there is also another genocide that Germany has actually committed, and that they are refusing to own up. So Germany could not afford that. That's why they came to the table. But even then, when they came to the table to discuss, they conveniently chose a partner they knew was not fully vested in the issue and really did not have genuine interest about the demands for reparation. And that is why when Germany refused to admit guilt under the first pillar of the Namibian law that says there must be a discussion, and under that law, under that discussion, the first thing that has to happen is for Germany to admit guilt to a crime of genocide. And then the second thing is that Germany must pay reparation and issue an apology. So within these talks, as the first pillar, which is really the determinant for whether you engage further on in the other pillars, as the first step, Germany refused to admit guilt to the crime of genocide. But still, the Namibian government and its representatives, they chose to go on anyway, because their primary intent is not really justice for our communities, but really to arrive at a position where some money could be channeled through the Namibian government to finance its operations and many other things. So that is the state of where we are at. The deal that was delivered between the two governments, we as a people have roundly rejected it, because it does not speak to our interest. It does not solve the issues for which we had demanded that Germany actually sit around the table with us and have a frank discussion that seeks to find a closure and redress for what has been wronged in the past. Because in our case, it's not only lives that were taken, land of our people. Our land is still sitting in the hands of the children of those who stole it from our fathers. 80% of it is still sitting in the hands of either descendants of German settlers or descendants of Afrikaner settlers, which is the group of people that came to rule Namibia after the First World War, when Germany lost that war and lost with it all the colonial possessions. So we want that to be returned. We want human remains, our ancestors, the body parts, I mean, the body parts, heads were beheaded. Women and children were asked to boil these heads and skin them and package them in boxes for them to be shipped to Europe. Those things continue to sit in museums in this continent. So many other artifacts of ours that were stolen. So for us, it's not really just a question of money, it's a question of many things. Compensation, a commensurate reparation package for us needs to involve issues of restitution that has to do with our land, the land that has to be returned to the extent possible. That which cannot be returned, of course, compensation has to be found. In Namibia up to today, for instance, ancestral claims to say this is where we lived. It's not even a category under which you can be given land, state land, if it's availed. In Namibia, for instance, today, there is no Genocide Remembrance Day. In Namibia, for instance, today, there are no fitting monuments erected to the memory and the remembrance of that horrific, the first genocide of the 20th century. Yet in Namibia, because that is the narrative that the state wants to advance, there are monuments in memory of the founding president. There are monuments and other things in memory of battles that were fought during what is called the Bush War of Angola, wherein the dominant group took an active role or a lead role. So it is only things from that era of our history that are remembered, that are memorialized. Of course, horrific days. A day like Kasinga, it's a day wherein Namibians lost their lives. 700 or so of them. Many were also injured, and the survivors had to be housed in different parts of the world. It was a terrible time. There is a day for that. But if you look in comparative terms to the genocide, wherein about 80% of my people were disseminated, and you look at the Nama people, 50% of their people were killed. There is nothing to remember that, So that is the state of the play. That is the politics of Namibia. In Namibia, you have two groups that are demanding justice, of Ovaherero Nama people, but really that has nobody to back them. We have a government that is supposed to be fighting in our own corner, but a government that for its own self-serving interest have chosen to rather either seek to sabotage us or to play on the opposite, on the opposite team, because we see them almost virtually collaborating on almost everything with the German side, because even now there was a report issued by the United Nations Special Rapporteurs that they have done us wrong in terms of our participation in that process. We know that the administration in Windhoek responded last week, and we hear the Germans are responding this week. We find that too much to be a coincidence. It's like people are sharing notes, So this is what we are faced with. So where we stand, as long as we are concerned, the discussion that must be had between us and Germany had not even begun. It had not even begun what took place between the two governments, the government in Windhoek and the government in Berlin. It's a process that was geared towards development aid and not reparations, because development aid is applied universally. It is support that is given to countries, and then those countries implement programs that are targeted for all citizens. And now reparations is something else, is punishment payment. It's a penalty you pay for a crime that you have committed. And it cannot be substituted with development aid because, again, a crime targets a certain people. So justice for that crime must target those people. And those people have names. And for us, it begins with the mere mention of our name. You know, because otherwise, if you don't want to recognize us, if you don't want to speak to the identity that we have as a people, it means it's another phase of a genocide. Because genocide is about obliteration, it's about annihilation, it's about wiping out a people of the face of the earth. And wiping out part of it is defacing that person, you know, making sure that that person does not exist by deleting their names, their identity. So, in our view, what our own government and the German government, by refusing even to recognize that this is an Ovaherero and Nama genocide, that is genocide, 102. It is nothing else.